If your surname is on this list, you've been carrying something, and nobody ever told you what it was. You may have heard your eyes hold the old country in them, some gray or green inheritance from the Highlands. They don't. Eye color is just weather. The name is the record, because you are not just Scottish by heritage. You are the last link in the chain of people who kept a name alive when keeping it could get you hanged and carried it across an ocean when they had nothing else left to carry. Some of these names were banned. One was outlawed by a king's own pen for 170 years. Stay until number 1, because that name belonged to a family that stayed loyal, never rebelled, and was burned off land they'd held for 600 years anyway. These names aren't dead, they've just been waiting for you to ask. Number 10, MacGregor, son of Gregor. And Gregor goes all the way back to a word meaning the watchful one, the vigilant. But the MacGregors weren't remembered for watching, they were remembered for being watched, hunted. In 1603, after a bloody fight at Glenfruin, James VI does something almost without precedent in European law. He doesn't just punish the clan, he abolishes the name. To be called MacGregor is now a crime you can hang for. You can't carry it. You can't pass it to your children. You can't gather in groups of more than 4. The chief is lured to Edinburgh under a promise of safe passage and executed. And for the next century the ban lifts, then slams shut again, until it's finally repealed in 1774, 170 years. So they became other people. They signed the parish registers as Murray, as Grant, as Drummond, some, with bitter irony, as Campbell, the very name that had taken their land. And they taught their children the real name in private, the way you hand down a secret. When you see the enormous list of names tied to Clan Gregor, you're not looking at a family tree, you're looking at a list of disguises. If your name is anywhere on it, someone in your line refused to let the real one die. The men who profited from that ban had a different problem with their name. Not that it was forbidden, that it would never be forgiven. Number 9, Campbell. It isn't son of anyone. It comes from the Gaelic Campbell, crooked mouth, wry mouth, a nickname pinned on an early ancestor and then worn generation after generation like a badge, a family that turned an insult into a dynasty. And what a dynasty. The Campbells became Dukes of Argyll, holding hundreds of thousands of acres, backing the winning side again and again. But one February night in 1692 fixed itself to the name forever. Government soldiers had been quartered in the homes of the MacDonalds of Glencoe for nearly 2 weeks, eating their food, sleeping by their fires. Before dawn, they turned on their hosts. 38 people died, and more in the snow above the glen. Scots law had a phrase for the precise horror of it: murder under trust. But here's what the legend leaves out. The order was written in Edinburgh and London, and signed at the very top. Of the soldiers, only a handful were Campbells at all. The officer who led them was a ruined old man whose own niece had married into the family he was sent to destroy. The Campbell motto is 2 words: forget not. The trouble was, no one else would either. Power couldn't protect the next family. They had land and a chief and centuries of standing, and they gambled all of it on one doomed prince. Number 8, Fraser. You've probably heard it lately on a television screen, but the name is far older and far stranger than any drama. It arrives in Scotland around the year 1160 as de Fressel, a Norman French name, foreign sounding. Some scholars argue even that's a misreading, a Gaelic name mangled by French-speaking clerks. Either way, this incomer's name buried itself so deep in the Highlands, it became one of the most Highland names there is. By the 1740s, the chief is Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, the Old Fox, a man who spent his whole life playing every side at once. When Bonnie Prince Charlie raises his standard, Lovat hedges. He stays home pleading illness and sends his son to war with the clan. It isn't enough. After Culloden, he's caught, tried, and on the 9th of April, 1747, beheaded on Tower Hill, the last man ever publicly beheaded in Britain. The Crown seized the estates, and that forfeiture shattered the old order and put Fraser families onto emigrant ships. One of them, generations later, would chart a wild river on the far side of the world that still carries the name, the Fraser. Their motto is, Je suis prest. I am ready, they had to be. Not every Scottish name was born in a glen. The next one was born on the most lawless ground in Britain, a place that belonged officially to no one. Number 7. Armstrong. This one means exactly what it sounds like, strong arm. The story goes that an ancestor lifted a fallen king back onto his horse in the middle of battle and was given land for the strength of his arm. Whether or not that's true, the Armstrongs lived up to it. They ruled the debatable land, the no-man's strip between Scotland and England, where, for centuries, neither crown's law could reach. They were the most feared riding family on the entire border, the steel bonnets, able to put thousands of horsemen in the saddle. In 1530, the king lures their chief, Johnny Armstrong, to a meeting under a promise of safety, and hangs him and his men where they stand. When Scotland and England finally join under one crown in 1603, the border is no longer useful. It has to be tamed. The Armstrong name is broken, the last laird hanged in Edinburgh. The family scattered. Many fled across the sea to Ulster, and from Ulster, decades later, on to America. Into the hills of Appalachia, carrying a hard name into a hard country. And then, in the strangest turn any of these names ever took, a man called Armstrong, descended from those borderers, became the first human being to set his boot on the moon. From the debatable land to the sea of tranquility, Invictus Maneo, I remain unconquered. If your own name has shown up yet, and I'll tell you now, number 1 is the one that's going to stay with you. Take 5 seconds to like and subscribe. There are 6 names left, and the stories only get heavier from here. Let's keep going, because back on the islands, one of the most common Scottish names of all is hiding a Viking. Number 6, MacLeod, son of Leod. And Leod comes from the Old Norse Ljótur, a word that means, of all things, ugly. A Gaelic son of wrapped around a Viking name. Because the MacLeods weren't originally Gaels at all, they were Norse Gaelic sea lords, the children of a world where the Hebrides spoke as much Norwegian as Gaelic. From Dunvegan Castle on Skye, held by the same family for some 800 years, the oldest continuously lived-in castle in the country. They ruled the Western Sea like a kingdom. They kept a tattered scrap of silk they called the fairy flag, said to save the clan 3 times if it was ever waved. But no flag saved Skye from what came in the 1800s. The clearances emptied the glens, and here's a detail that will stay with you. Before the ships left, the islanders danced. They had a dance for it, steps they performed on the eve of leaving, and they called it simply America. They danced the name of the place, taking them away from the place they loved. They carried the Gaelic across the Atlantic to Cape Breton, where it was still spoken 100 years later. By now you think you can guess where these names come from. The next one breaks that for good, because the most Scottish hero who ever lived carried a name that meant outsider. Number 5, Wallace. Say the name and you think of one man, the freedom fighter, the patriot, the face of Scottish independence itself. So here's the part that should stop you cold. Wallace doesn't mean Scottish, it means foreigner, Welshman, stranger. The name comes from an old word the Anglo-Saxons used for the Britons, the Welsh-speaking people who were there before them. In the southwest of Scotland, around Ayrshire and Renfrew, it marked out the old Britons of Strathclyde, people whose blood was Celtic but not Gaelic, outsiders in the eyes of the clerks who wrote them down. William Wallace's own family were recorded as Llywelys, the Welshmen. Sit with that. The man who fought and died horribly for the question of who truly belonged to this land carried a surname that said his own people were strangers in it, and it didn't matter. The name became across the entire world, a single word for defiance. If you carry it, you carry proof that belonging was never about blood. It was about what you were willing to stand for. If a foreigner's name could become the soul of Scotland, then it shouldn't surprise you that a servant's name became its crown. Number 4. Cameron, Camshron, Crooked Nose, a blunt little nickname for some long-dead chief, handed down until it covered a whole clan of Lochaber. Their motto is gentler than the face that named them, Ao Naib Richele, let us unite. And in 1745, one Cameron's choice changed everything. Donald Cameron of Lochiel, remembered as the gentle Lochiel, did not want the rising. He thought it was doomed, but when the prince landed, Lochiel came out for him, and because Lochiel came out, others followed. The rebellion that ended at Culloden might never have begun without him. There's a quiet, devastating image from that summer. On the very day he learned the prince had landed, Lochiel planted a long avenue of trees at his home. A man planting a future on the day he gambled it all away. Culloden broke them. Achnacarry was burned. Lochiel died in exile in France and never came home. And his brother became the last Jacobite ever executed. And the bitterest part came later, when Lochiel's own descendants cleared their own people off the land, and Camerons sailed for Canada. The trees he planted that day are still standing. Lochiel handed a prince his army. The next family handed Scotland its kings. Number 3. Stewart. There's no ancient warlord behind this one. No Glen, no war cry. It's a job title. The steward, the man who ran the royal household, kept the accounts, managed the king's estates, a servant's name. And the servants took the throne. The high stewards of Scotland married into the royal line, and the family name became the name of the crown. Stewart, later spelled Stewart in the French way. They ruled Scotland, then ruled England too, and then they lost it. When the last Stewart claim collapsed at Culloden, the dynasty went into exile. The king over the water, toasted in secret by people who lifted a glass and passed it over a bowl of water, so the words meant something only the loyal would catch. Emigrants carried Stewart out into the world, not as a job, but as a banner. The memory of a lost cause and a vanished crown. It's now one of the most widespread Scottish names on earth. If it's yours, it began with a man holding the keys to someone else's house, and ended with kings. But before the Stewarts ever ruled the Isles, another family already held them, and called themselves not stewards, but lords of a kingdom of their own. Number 2. MacDonald, son of Donald, and Donald, Dominal, means world ruler. It's not a modest name, and they weren't a modest people. The MacDonalds were the lords of the Isles, a Gaelic sea kingdom that ruled the west coast, and the Hebrides almost as an independent power, answering to the Scottish crown only when it suited them. That independence was its undoing. The lordship was stripped away in 1493, and one branch, the MacDonalds of Glencoe, became the name on the other side of that February massacre, the hosts, not the killers. The family fed for 12 days, then murdered before dawn. The ones who didn't die in the first minutes died in the mountains, barefoot in the snow, running from their own home. And still the name didn't die. It became one of the largest Scottish names in the world, carried to every country the diaspora touched, a name that holds a lost kingdom and a winter massacre inside the same 2 syllables. When a MacDonald hears it read aloud at a gathering an ocean from Scotland, both of those things are still in it. Glencoe was one terrible night. The last name on this list lived through something slower, and it emptied an entire country. Number 1, Mackay, son of Aod, and Oath means fire. A people from the far, far north of Scotland, the empty top of the map, where their motto was just 2 words, Manu Forti, with a strong hand, and here is the cruelty of it. The Mackays did everything a clan was supposed to do. They were loyal to the crown. They were anti-Jacobite. They didn't rise. They didn't rebel. They stood with the government while other clans burned for the other side. It didn't save them. In 1814, the Great Valley of Strathnaver, the heart of Mackay country, was cleared for sheep. Factors and soldiers went through the townships and set the houses alight, sometimes with the old and the sick still inside. The man behind the burnings was put on trial for it and walked free. The accounts that survive are almost unbearable. A man of 90, burned out of his home, who went and stood over his dead wife's grave and told her that now, at last, no one could ever evict her again. And then walked alone to the coast, a father who carried his fever-stricken daughters 25 miles to the sea, one at a time, then went back for the other. They boarded ships for Nova Scotia and the Red River. They lost the land their family had held for 600 years, but they would not lose the name. They carried it onto the boats, and they kept their language alive in Canada for a century after Scotland had tried to end it. Loyalty didn't save them. The name survived anyway, because they decided it would. There's a moment that happens now, all over the world, in kitchens in Nova Scotia and front rooms in Otago and old farmhouses in the Carolinas. Someone finds a photograph in a drawer with a name written on the back in handwriting nobody alive can quite read, or they sit down at a laptop late at night and type their own last name into a search bar for the first time, and they stop because they had no idea. The kingdoms are gone. The lordship of the Isles is a line in a book. The glens hold sheep now, and the chiefs are names cut into worn stone. But every one of these surnames is still here, not because of castles or coats of arms, because somewhere in the line, a person decided the name would not end with them. They declared it at a border when it would have been safer to lie. They whispered it to a child. They carried it onto a ship with everything else left behind. If your surname is on this list, understand what you're actually holding. It was never your eyes. It was always the name. And the name isn't a label someone filed away. It's a decision made under pressure by someone who survived and handed across centuries and oceans all the way to you. So tell me, drop your surname in the comments below and tell me which of these 10 hit closest to home. Which name is yours and what you know of the people who carried it before you. I read them. And if this opens something up in you tonight, subscribe. There are more names and more of these stories still waiting.